I'm Johnny Ashley in the Hood in the Woods, your neighborhood backwoods history and travel channel. You can find me on Facebook as The Real Hood in the Woods and on Instagram as Abandoned in Appalachia. Now if you'd like to help me out and help yourself out too, you should get yourself the official copy of the Hood in the Woods book, Volume 1 and Volume 2. The legend of John Henry is American folklore, but unlike Pecos Bill and Paul Bunyan, it has its roots firmly planted in the truth. Most of what we know about John Henry comes from research by Guy B. Johnson. He was born in 1901 in Texas. From 1927 to 1969, he was a professor at the University of North Carolina. As a black man, he was interested in his heritage, so he came here to Summers County, West Virginia, and he saw the tunnel that John Henry had raced a steam-driven machine in, and he talked to witnesses of this race. Although there's been many theories about who the real John Henry was, Guy B. Johnson's theory is probably the most accurate. John Henry was born in the 1840s, and he was liberated after the Civil War. He relocated to Virginia to find work in the Reconstruction effort. In Virginia, he was arrested for burglary and sentenced to the state penitentiary. It was a large white building that rose over the city's skyline. Because it was a Reconstruction era and the North had taken over the South, the warden of the penitentiary was a Quaker from Pennsylvania. He was shocked and horrified to see the conditions in the penitentiary. So to save the inmates from having to live there, he began leasing them out to private corporations. Later he would speak out against inmate labor. John Henry was leased to the C&O, the Chesapeake and Ohio. He was a giant of a man, standing over 6 foot tall and weighing in at over 200 pounds. His strength was legendary. The workers would often sing songs to help them keep a cadence swinging their hammers. They would make up and sing songs about each other, and those songs, they became the beginning of the legend of John Henry. The songs spoke of his superhuman strength, like how he could swing a 20-pound hammer in each hand. Other songs described his softer side, like being kind-hearted and having good morals. By the time the railroad reached the Great Bend Mountain, John Henry was the leader of his crew. Leveling grade and laying track turned into drilling holes into the rocks. The rocks would then be stuffed full of dynamite, exploded, and hauled away. The way they would drill the holes is they'd have a big long chisel, and they hit it like this, and then they give it like a quarter turn, and then they hit it again. And that's like bam, 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 slowly drilling the hole out. The Great Bend Tunnel is 6,450 feet long, and it was completed in 1872. The famous story about John Henry happened here in 1870. At the nearby Lewis Tunnel, the C&O Railroad had used a steam drill. After they were done there, they brought it here. John Henry was impressed by the speed of the drill, so he challenged it to a race. After the dust had settled after the hour-long contest, John Henry had driven a 14-foot hole, and the machine had only gone 9 feet. It was reported that the machine lost some time, though, when it hit a seam of harder rock. In 1929, Guy Johnson interviewed witnesses to the race. Most of them agreed that John Henry didn't die after it, but later in a rock slide, or of disease. 1873 was the last year that John Henry was noted in the records of the Virginia State Penitentiary. This is before his discharge date, and there is no record of a pardon. He might have passed, but legends don't die. As time passed, the men that had worked with him began working on other crews. They continued singing the songs about him, and soon many more people were singing them. Westward expansion was in full effect, and a man who could swing a hammer could always find a job. Soon John Henry was the hero of the track layers. They loved to sing about him, and now people who had never met him were making up songs about him. These songs began to blur the line between fact and fantasy. The early 1900s began the Jazz Age, and multiple songs were written about John Henry. Some of those songs were made into records. Records weren't new technology, but they had just become a lot more affordable for the public to own. One of the songs about John Henry ends with, "They took him to the White House, and they buried him in the sand. Every train goes by, says there lays a steel driving man." John Henry was pretty cool, but it wasn't bury him in the president's front yard cool. Plus, the soil in D.C. isn't very sandy, and there ain't no train lines going by the White House, so everyone just assumed that the songwriter took a couple creative liberties with his song. Many years later, the Virginia State Penitentiary was taken out of use and torn down. It was sitting on valuable land, and the city was eager to develop it. That large white building had been an imposing part of the city's skyline for over 100 years. As the land was excavated, multiple mass graves were dug out of the sandy soil. Not only did the penitentiary have sandy soil, but it also had a train line going right by it. It's completely possible that John Henry was one of the men in those graves. As people have researched John Henry, sometimes he's been confused with another man named John Hardy. They both worked for the railroad, and they both were in West Virginia. John Hardy was in McDowell County, West Virginia. In 1892, he shot another man over a dice game, and a woman. He was sentenced to death by hanging, and according to legend, he came out and he sang a song repenting all his sins and warning young men to stay away from whiskey. Just like John Henry, many songs were sung about him, and there's 1,000 different little variations. Sometimes when the songs have been consolidated into lists, John Hardy songs get put in the John Henry category, and John Henry songs get put in the John Hardy category. These 1800s tunnels, they were designed for steam engines to go through. But after the conversion to diesel engines was made, the railways abandoned these tunnels and they made new ones that could fit the larger engines. If you can't tell, this one's like 10 feet taller. Alright, that's my video. Hope you liked it. If you did like it, you need to hit the like button and hit the subscribe button. Don't be watching my stuff for free. Now, me and John Henry have been talking about this, and here are our suggested video picks. You can watch the Christiansburg Industrial Institute. That was Booker T. Washington School. Right here, we're going to have Kidnapped by the Circus, which is a story about two little black kids who was albino and they got kidnapped and sold to a sideshow. This one's got a musical intro, so if you ain't with it, just kind of fast forward a couple minutes, all right? Over here, me and him, we had a long conversation about this, and we decided we're going to put up the Smithfield Plantation. Now, this isn't just a story of one family, it's a story of two families.